President Trump capping off a busy week in foreign policy, much of it centered on his desire to acquire Greenland.
It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired. There's nothing wrong with it.
Let's start with something that should make you uncomfortable. Not because it's confusing, not because it's complicated, but because it was said out loud on a global stage by the President of the United States, and people are still trying to pretend it didn't mean what it clearly meant. On January 21st, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Donald Trump looked straight at America's closest allies and delivered a message that sounded less like diplomacy and more like a mafia warning. "You can say yes," he said, "and we will be very appreciative. Or you can say no, and we will remember." Let that sit for a second. That wasn't a joke. That wasn't a gaffe. That wasn't Trump being Trump. That was the President of the United States issuing a public ultimatum to NATO allies, live, on camera, in front of world leaders, CEOs, central bankers, and the global press. Support my plan to acquire Greenland or face consequences. That's not how alliances talk. That's how enforcers talk. And if you're wondering why markets shook, why European leaders looked rattled, and why the phrase transatlantic rupture suddenly stopped sounding academic, this is why. Because what Trump did in Davos wasn't just controversial. It was a threat wrapped in a smile. Let's rewind the scene for a moment. Davos was electric that day. People queued for hours just to get into the hall. CNBC reporters stood in line for 90 minutes. Blackstone CEO Steve Schwarzman, one of the most powerful financiers on the planet, waited like everyone else. Why? Because everyone knew Trump was going to address the elephant in the room: NATO, Europe, Greenland, and America's new posture toward its allies. The mood in the room wasn't curiosity, it was anxiety. And Trump played it like a seasoned performer. He joked, he teased, he insulted, he mocked French President Emmanuel Macron's sunglasses. What the hell was that? He asked, to laughter mixed with cringing silence. He complained about Switzerland's former president, calling her difficult. She kept saying the same thing over and over. She rubbed me the wrong way. Think about that for a second. This wasn't a rally crowd. This was the World Economic Forum. And Trump was naming and mocking European leaders like he was on a late-night talk show. Except the stakes were military alliances, global trade, and continental security. Diplomatic norms didn't just bend that day. They snapped. After more than an hour of circling, Trump finally said it. "Would you like me to talk about Greenland?" The response in the room was uneven, some nervous laughter, some groans. One Danish attendee reportedly muttered, "This is ridiculous." Because by now, everyone knew this wasn't a joke anymore. Trump announced that Washington was seeking immediate negotiations to acquire Greenland from Denmark, so the US could build a massive Golden Dome missile defense system. He dismissed Greenland as a giant piece of ice. No mention of the 57,000 people who actually live there. No mention of their right to self-determination. Just ice and strategic value. Then came the line that made the room inhale sharply. "No nation or group of nations," Trump said, "is in any position to secure Greenland other than the United States." Translation: you can't protect it. We can, so it should be ours. And just in case anyone missed the implication, Trump added something chilling. "We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force, where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that." The room exhaled when he said, "I won't do that." But here's the thing, that relief was fake. Because the threat had already been delivered. Days before Davos, Trump had already shown his hand. He announced 10% tariffs, rising to 25% by June 1st on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, Britain, the Netherlands, and Finland. All NATO members, all allies. And the conditions for avoiding those tariffs? A deal. A deal involving the complete and total purchase of Greenland. Read that again. 8 NATO allies facing punitive trade measures because they refuse to surrender the sovereign territory of another NATO ally. This is unprecedented. This isn't hard bargaining. This is weaponizing trade against the alliance that has defended Europe for 75 years. Imagine the precedent. If you're militarily weaker, you don't deserve sovereignty. If you rely on collective defense, you owe land. If America protects you, America collects. That logic doesn't just damage NATO, it destroys its foundation. Trump didn't stop there. He justified his claim by attacking Denmark's military history. He said Denmark fell to Germany in World War II after just 6 hours of fighting, implying they couldn't defend Greenland or even themselves. Let's pause right here. Think about what that argument actually means. Trump is saying that allies deemed too weak should surrender territory to stronger allies. That is the exact opposite of collective defense. NATO is built on one idea. An attack on one is an attack on all, regardless of size or strength. Trump's argument flips that on its head. It says, power decides ownership. Force decides legitimacy. Strength decides rights. That's not NATO. That's empire logic. Trump then turned his fire directly on NATO itself. The problem with NATO, he said, is that we'll be there for them 100%, but I'm not sure they'd be there for us. That statement ignores reality. After 9/11, NATO invoked Article 5 for the first time in history, in defense of the United States. Danish soldiers fought and died alongside Americans in Afghanistan. But in Trump's worldview, memory doesn't matter. Only transactions do. He repeated the claim that America gives everything and gets nothing. And then came the line that revealed everything. He called Greenland a very small ask compared to what America has given Europe over decades. Let that sink in. European territory, as back payment, security, as a service with overdue fees. This isn't alliance thinking. This is protection racket. European leaders weren't confused by Trump's message. They understood it perfectly. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen spoke just hours before Trump took the stage. Her words were measured, but devastating. The shift in the international order is not only seismic, she said, it is permanent. And the sheer speed of change far outstrips anything we have seen in decades. Then she added the line that should have set off alarms everywhere. While many of us may not like it, we must deal with the world as it is now. Translation, the old rules are gone, the old America is gone. Force, leverage, and pressure have replaced norms and agreements. She warned that plunging into a downward spiral between allies would embolden adversaries, Russia and China, which makes this even more astonishing, because Trump is creating the rupture himself. Then came Canada. Prime Minister Mark Carney delivered one of the most honest speeches of the week. "We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition," he said. Not a phase, not an adjustment, a rupture. He warned that great powers are now weaponizing everything: tariffs, finance, supply chains, economic integration. And then he dropped the line that explains why middle powers are panicking. When we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. That's not a theory, that's reality. Carney was saying, if we face the US alone, we lose. If we compete to be the most accommodating, we surrender sovereignty while pretending we still have it. That's a coalition forming, not against Russia or China, but against American coercion. Unthinkable. Until now. By Tuesday, markets were rattled. The Dow dropped nearly 2%. The S&P 500 slid 2%. The Nasdaq fell 2.4%. Uncertainty does that. Then Wednesday, suddenly, Trump announced a framework deal after meeting NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. Tariff threats eased. Stocks surged. Details, none. Sovereignty, not discussed. Ownership, unclear. Greenland's people, unmentioned. And that's where we pause, because the contradiction at the heart of this story hasn't resolved. Trump demands ownership and title. NATO officials talk about collective security. Those are not the same thing. This is classic diplomatic theater. Trump says, we have a framework. Denmark says Greenland is not for sale. NATO says sovereignty wasn't discussed. Greenland says absolutely not. Everyone smiles, everyone nods, everyone walks away claiming success. But underneath that polite choreography is a problem that didn't go away. Trump's ambition is intact. Even Denmark admits that. Their foreign minister said taking military force off the table was positive, but made it clear Trump's territorial goals haven't changed. That's not a resolution. That's a postponement. It's a diplomatic pause button, not a solution. And pauses like this don't end crises. They delay them until the next escalation. calculation. One thing Trump clearly miscalculated was Greenland itself. This wasn't some abstract debate happening in distant capitals. People in Nuuk showed up. Nearly 1/3 of the city's population demonstrated against Trump's proposal. Signs across the capital made it unambiguous. No American takeover, no purchase, no deal. Greenlandic officials flatly rejected the idea that their future could be negotiated over their heads, and that's important. Because Trump keeps talking about Greenland as if it's an empty freezer waiting to be claimed. It's not. It's a place with people, institutions, elections, and a growing sense of identity. And the more Washington pressures them, the more resistance hardens. Trump's core argument sounds simple on the surface. America needs Greenland to defend against Russia and China. But here's the contradiction no one in the administration seems able to answer. Threatening NATO allies over Greenland weakens the very alliance that contains Russia and China. You don't strengthen deterrence by breaking trust. You don't secure the Arctic by fracturing the coalition that patrols it. You don't counter Beijing by pushing Europe away. Trump is undermining security in the name of security. It's like burning down the fire station so you can install a better alarm system. And this is where things got really serious. European nations didn't just issue statements, they moved troops. Operation Arctic Endurance began last week. Small but symbolic contingents from France, Germany, the UK, and the Netherlands deployed to Greenland. Not to provoke, not to escalate, but to send a message. Greenland is Danish territory, NATO territory, European territory. France went even further, requesting a NATO exercise in Greenland and offering additional contributions. This is unprecedented. Alliance members positioning forces on territory claimed by the alliance leader. That's not symbolism anymore. That's physical resistance. That's NATO preparing quietly for the possibility that its biggest member might not be acting in good faith. The political response across Europe hardened just as fast. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer was blunt. "I will not yield. Britain will not yield on our principles and values about the future of Greenland under threats of tariffs." Sweden's foreign minister was even sharper. "We will not be blackmailed." That word matters. Blackmail. 8 European nations were threatened individually with tariffs. And instead of competing to accommodate Trump, exactly what Mark Carney warned against, they stood together. Collective resistance forced Trump's partial backdown. That's not coincidence. That's leverage working against coercion. Before Trump even spoke at Davos, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Europeans to sit down and wait. Take a deep breath. Don't react with reflexive anger. But anger isn't reflexive when someone threatens your territory, your economy, and your sovereignty all at once. Belgian Prime Minister Bart de Wever captured the dilemma perfectly. So many red lines are being crossed that you have a choice between self-respect and giving in. That's the impossible position Trump created. Europe now has to choose between dignity and alliance. Those should never be opposites, but Trump made them mutually exclusive. And then the story took a turn so surreal it almost feels fictional. Trump linked Greenland to the Nobel Peace Prize. In a text message to Norway's prime minister, Trump said he no longer felt obligated to think purely of peace after not winning the prize. Read that again: foreign policy driven by resentment over an award, threatening allies, weaponizing trade, demanding territory because he didn't get a medal. That's not strategic realism, that's personal grievance shaping global affairs. And the instability that creates is staggering. While all of this unfolded, China barely had to say a word. Its vice premier stood in Davos and presented Beijing as a reliable trade partner. No shouting, no threats, no ultimatums. He criticized unilateral actions and tariff coercion without naming the US. Everyone knew who he meant. This is the geopolitical irony of the moment. Trump alienated allies in real time, while Beijing positioned itself as the calm, predictable alternative. For Europe, that's a dangerous temptation, because when your traditional partner becomes volatile, you start hedging. And every hedge against Washington is a win for Beijing. Trump handed China an opportunity without China firing a shot. Trump's behavior at Davos made one thing unmistakably clear. He sees alliances as transactions. He even proposed a border of peace for Gaza, requiring a $1 billion payment for permanent membership with himself as permanent chairman. Peace for a fee, security for a price. And then, at a CEO reception, Trump joked, "Usually they say he's a horrible dictator-type person. I'm a dictator. But sometimes you need a dictator." That joke landed differently after everything else. After threatening allies. After demanding territory. After embracing coercion. It didn't sound like humor. It sounded like self-description. At this point, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte did something extraordinary. He reminded the American president publicly that allies died defending America. For every 2 Americans who paid the ultimate price, he said, there was 1 soldier from another NATO country who did not come back to his family. Denmark, the Netherlands, others. He reminded Trump that 9/11 triggered Article 5, that Denmark didn't just accept protection, it paid in blood. Think about how abnormal that is. The NATO chief explaining basic alliance history to the US president. Either Trump doesn't know, or he doesn't care. Neither option is reassuring. A professor at the University of Copenhagen put it plainly. The United States will not own Greenland, but US-European relations will never return to normal. That's the real takeaway from Davos. Even if Greenland stays Danish, even if tariffs are delayed, even if the framework holds, trust is shattered. European leaders watched an American president threaten them publicly, insult them personally, weaponize trade, dismiss their values, question their sacrifices, joke about dictatorship. You don't forget that. You prepare for it. January 21st, 2026 will be remembered, not because a deal was signed, but because a truth was revealed. The World Economic Forum witnessed a transatlantic rupture, live. An American president told allies, comply, or we will remember. Europe responded, we will not be blackmailed. NATO scrambled for a framework that solved nothing, only delayed confrontation. Greenland rejected the sale. Denmark refused surrender. European troops deployed. Markets swung wildly. China watched quietly. Alliance members are now preparing, psychologically and militarily, for a world where Washington may be a threat, not a guarantor. Whether this framework prevents an immediate crisis or merely postpones a catastrophic breakdown, that remains to be seen. But one thing is certain, the old order is gone, and everyone at Davos knew it. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think this framework actually stabilizes NATO, or just buys time before a bigger crisis? Has the transatlantic alliance crossed a point of no return? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Support this work by liking the video, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated, because this story is far from over. We're watching history unfold.